Winnipeg believes they can rewrite the narrative for Game 5 after two disastrous defeats, and I'll believe them. For one more time, I think the Jets are going to do it. Let's chat about why on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support, especially as we are going through these trying playoff times. A lot of you are probably as stressed as I am watching this team, and it has been quite a first four games for the Jets. Obviously, things went really well at the start, and then the second half of the start of the series has been an unmitigated disaster. But Game 5, I think, is a really big opportunity for the Jets to reset, and I want to talk about that. I want to talk about whether Hellebuyck is really at fault and what has gone wrong. Mike McKenna brought up some really good points earlier today, and I think it's worth chatting about that, and maybe some ideas towards the end here about how the Jets could make some internal swaps to try and juice this middle six, because right now, Winnipeg's not getting a lot of offense, and with Vilardi coming back in Game 5, Winnipeg has got to figure out something to give this team some more scoring punch without, reliably, having any other options, right? The Jets, what they have is what they have, so they've got to figure out how to make things work with what's on hand, and that's not exactly easy to do, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. Before we dive into Game 5 and really the implications of a reset button, did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Now, like I said, after games 3 and 4, a lot of us were feeling pretty raw. I felt pretty doomery, in part because, as much as this team, I think this year has earned a lot of the benefit of the doubt when they struggle, I've seen this team do this a lot in the playoffs. The last few years, how many playoff game wins do you think the Jets have? It's 4. In 3 years, they have 4 wins, including this season. So obviously, things have not been great. And after losses, the Jets haven't won a game since 2019 when the Blues hurt us pretty badly and then went on to win a Stanley Cup. So, the Jets don't exactly have a great playoff track record as of late. And I really felt like this year was going to be different. Arneal preached 5 to 10% better at the start. He had this team in many ways playing better than it's ever played in a couple of key categories. Not quite to the level of the 17-18 team, but still, broadly speaking, very, very good, right? Obviously, the roster quality kind of impacts how close this team can get to that 17-18 squad, but compared to the last several years, this Jets team is really good. And so when they lost their composure in both Game 3 and 4, obviously you thought, oh, Lord, here we go again. Here's another collapse like we've seen so many times. Hellebuyck can't make a save. The defense is just all over the place. The Jets forwards are basically non-existent. This stuff is not exactly foreign to us. It's kind of like trauma at this point. We keep going through it over and over again. You might call it the definition of insanity, but I still think that despite my own anxieties about the series, Game 5 is going to be a Jets win. I think Winnipeg is going to come home. I think they're going to feel pretty pissed off. I would be too if I was in their shoes. I know the fans are pretty angsty. I don't think any of us are happy about the result. But, they are going to have felt like they really let themselves down, let the team down, and let the city down. And they're going to come out with a real sense of purpose. Now, they started Game 4 really well, and then things flaked out after the game-tying goal at the end of the first period. I think the Jets need to just find a way to grit through it, right? This is the part of the playoffs where, early on, you're already facing adversity. And for Winnipeg, in past moments during the regular season, they've managed to rally. Now that they don't quite have all of their components that have traditionally carried them, leading them to huge success, they're going to have to dig really deep and find ways to draw success here in the postseason. And Hellebuyck was actually asked about it earlier today, and he basically said, look, I just need to be better, right? He still says he has confidence in himself and the team, but he basically said, at the end of the day, we can't just change every single thing that, goes wrong, right? We have to stick to what worked. And in a lot of ways, I actually do agree with that. Do I think that there are things that the Jets need to adjust? Yes. But in a lot of ways, I think it's because they've fallen into the trap that the Blues have set. St. Louis has been there before. They're a cup winner for a reason. This team may not have many of the parts that led them to that cup run, but they still have a legacy of recent success, and at least some of these guys have been successful elsewhere. So they have veteran experience. They are playing with house money. No one expected them to be in the playoffs a couple of months ago. Here they are, one of the hottest teams in the league, taking it to the Jets, and now they have a chance to do that on the road. I think this is where the Jets absolutely need to stand up and deny them a road win. The Blues have been an absolute monster on their own turf. The Jets have been an absolute monster on their own turf. You've got to take advantage of your home ice and make this one count. And I think the Jets are going to do that. I don't know if Hellebuyck's going to have a huge response game, because I think what's wrong with him is stuff that's more on the tactical layer, and I don't know if the Jets are going to be able to overcome that just yet. We'll chat about him in particular in just a little bit, but I think for the moment, right, my big question is, are the Jets going to get depth scoring outside of the top line? The middle six has kind of been a bit of a ghost, and I hate to say it, but like outside of maybe Cole Perfetti, sometimes Morgan Barron if he's up there, I haven't really noticed a lot of other players. Appleton last game had a nice opportunity and rang it off the crossbar. Other than that, you really haven't noticed him in the series. Adam Lowry, the captain, the most notable thing he did last game was start a fight and kind of, when the game's already over, get into a bit of a scuffle at the end and yank somebody's helmet off. So it's kind of like, not really the kind of leadership that you're looking for. And I think that's just natural when your frustration's boiling over. The Blues have had your number in the last two games, and you are just feeling very angry and frustrated that you can't make your style of hockey work. So Game 5, I think, is an opportunity for the team to come back home, wipe away. It's now a clean slate, right? It's a best of three. You've got a 2-2 series tie, and I think that those first two wins on home ice were such a saving grace. As this team did at the regular season, especially the start of the year, where they built themselves a huge cushion that kept them in it long enough to, even when they struggled, still win the President's Trophy, that logic now has to apply to the rest of the series. And it's probably a good thing that it's happening now, because I think the Jets maybe needed a wake-up call. Not that they haven't had those before in the regular season, but here's where the realities of the playoffs are going to start settling in. And for the Jets, I think that this is maybe really instructive. The Blues have been there before. They've done the deed. They have won the cup. They have, again, all the confidence, a lot of swagger, and this is a really tough first-round opponent. I actually think that if they had gone to maybe Vegas, they would have also given Vegas an absolute fit, just like Minnesota is right now. I think both teams, compared to what we see in the Eastern Conference wildcard, that's like Weenie Hut Jr. The West wildcards are just cracked, man. They have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that for whatever flaws that they may have had during the regular season, they have absolutely brought it in the postseason. And every single series in the West is now tied 2-2. So it's not like the Jets are the only ones who are struggling to perhaps meet the moment in the postseason. It has been an absolute dogfight between every single team in the Western Conference picture. And it almost makes me wonder if at the end of all of this, whoever does survive the West is just going to be so out of gas that the East has easy pickings. But we'll see, right? Long way to go. That is literally like months away. Here and now, the Jets need to come out with a big Game 5, and that really is going to have to start in net. I want to talk about whether Connor Hellebuyck has really been that big of an issue, because the answer is yes, but I think that there's a level of nuance to why he is struggling, and I think it's worth chatting about that in particular. Before we dive into some of the more specifics and nitty-gritties of maybe what Mike McKenna was saying about him and whether this is something that's fixable, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Gametime. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, it's unlike anything else. As somebody who's been to a whiteout game in 2017, 2018, can personally attest to the fact that the speed, the intensity, the energy in the building, it is next level. And thanks to Gametime, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Gametime is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer, and with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. So, this includes sports, concerts, comedy, theater, does not matter. Whatever you're interested in, they've got you covered. And if you are getting a seat, they will give you panoramic seat views so you actually know what you're buying. You're not just getting a blind seat somewhere. And of course, you are always protected by their cancellation protection, job loss assurance, or their 24-hour return guarantee. So if you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, go with Gametime, download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are continuing to chat about the run of the current series and what's gone right, what's gone wrong, and how the Jets can kind of reset ahead of Game 5. Obviously, the game is on Wednesday, so there's one more day now. Perhaps for, sparing our own mental sanity, maybe a little bit of a 2-day break isn't the worst. But for Hellebuyck, I think a lot has been said about his performance, some of which I agree with, some of which I have pushed back against. I think in the first 2 games, I was very staunchly defending him. And in the second game, I really didn't have to say anything. He dropped a 9.55. It was awesome. The first game, I thought that wasn't really on him. The goals that the Jets conceded were, double, triple screens on the power play and stuff, or you'd have a bad PK decision where somebody gets really aggressive, in this case, Lowry, and it leaves Robert Thomas wide open. And Thomas is one of the only players on this Blues team that you absolutely cannot leave open. There's a couple of really, really, really elite shooters who maybe don't get a lot of credit league-wide, but the Blues are more lethal than I think people realize. They don't get talked about in the same vein as a lot of the top contenders because there are some issues with some of the deeper parts of their roster. But make no mistake, their top 6 is very, very gifted, very, very talented. And guys like Thomas, they will pick a corner. Now with Hellebuyck, Mike McKenna, tweeted something that I thought was very resonant and kind of talked about why, he thinks Helly has struggled in particular. And it's been an issue in the playoffs. And I think the first thing to note is that the playoff structure itself actually exposes Hellebuyck more when you look at, the regular season. The regular season, you're not going to face as many teams with so many elite shooters and gifted players, right? And that's one thing. The second thing is because you are facing a team multiple times consecutively in a series, when that team looks at their pre-scout and the adjustments that you're making throughout the series. They compare and contrast. They look at what's working, what's not. They can make adjustments in series against you that they might not be able to do during the regular season. The regular season, the team's rosters may look totally different game to game because you might face a team one time earlier in the season, then a month or 2 later, you've got a totally different roster thanks to injuries, trades, what have you, all that stuff. And so what's happening with Hellebuyck is, look, he is big and boring, right? And McKenna really, said that this is such a great thing, but he's not as explosive. You notice Hellebuyck's lateral motion isn't the biggest thing. He's not the swiftest on his skates. He is built to absorb pucks and less so make those really reflexive saves. Now, the glove hand thing, I've seen a lot of people talk about. And yes, you could argue that he needs to raise it and try to make those hand catches and set yourself up better for protecting the top of the net, but I just don't know if that's going to necessarily make a difference. It's not something that Hellebuyck really has done traditionally, and so I don't know if making that change right now is going to help. I don't even know if Hellebuyck would even be comfortable doing that, but I think the bigger challenge is you look at how most of the goals are going in, and a lot of it is on screens and tips and deflections. Like half, 50% plus of the goals that have been scored have been through traffic, and I think the biggest problem right now is when the Blues do their thing, which, they're very much a shot quality over quantity team, they are finding ways to make life very difficult for Winnipeg. And I think one of the biggest illustrations is I mentioned this on the last show, but Sundqvist came across Hellebuyck's vision, which is already a nice screen, right? Sundqvist's a big dude. And so Tucker was at the basically more towards the blue line in between, almost a little bit above the faceoff circle when he took his slap shot. And you notice the Blues all shifted to the right. There's a huge lateral screen. The problem with all of that is if it was just Sundqvist, it already would have been, a decent sized screen, but maybe Hellebuyck can see around him and kind of get that little bit of a shot location, right? He can see when Tucker winds up. He might have a little more anticipation or ability to see the puck. What happened was then Morrissey was chasing behind. Now, look, that was probably Morrissey's assignment, and Morrissey may have been trying to shove Tucker out of the way. The problem is when he did it, the whole thing, and really the timing aspect here is crucial. Tucker waited for Sundqvist to drift across. It drew Morrissey behind him, and then he slapped that thing home, and Hellebuyck never had a chance. Helly never saw it. It was a clean beat, and here, you basically get a double screen for free. The Jets didn't leave enough of that space open for Hellebuyck to see. Morrissey got caught chasing again. And this isn't just the first time that it's happened. A lot of the goals have kind of come off of stuff like this where, the tipped pucks and point shots from distance are extra dangerous because Hellebuyck just can't see anything. There's too many bodies, some of which are his own. Look at another one of the goals. One of them went straight off of Pionk's butt. It's a cheeky goal, pun intended. But if that's how this is going to go, then Winnipeg needs to adjust and figure out a way to make things not as chaotic, right? Hellebuyck's game is always going to be Hellebuyck's game, and it's usually very successful. But now that the Blues have adjusted, Winnipeg needs to answer. If you know that you're going to start giving up these opportunities, then take away those high point shots. You're already trying to defend the slot, and you've been more successful at that over much of the past couple of months. Now it's time to try and get the puck away and pressure those puck carriers who are near the blue line, who are above the faceoff circles. Don't let them hit it from distance. Stop giving them time and space to do that. The Blues, under pressure, you can make them make turnovers. You can make them make mistakes, but so far Winnipeg hasn't really done that. And then at the other end of the ice, the Jets just aren't really creating a lot of offense. And so I struggle with this because I absolutely agree that you want Hellebuyck to make more saves. You want him to not be conceding 5+ goals. He said that as much in today's presser, or actually it was yesterday's presser, with the practice gate and all. But the problem is like, if you say you make these adjustments, right? Like, how many of these things were specifically on Hellebuyck? Like, how is he supposed to make the save if he can't see the puck? Unless he changes his game fundamentally, which at this point, I don't see how he could. He's pretty set in his ways, and I don't think that that's going to change. I just don't know, right? Like, what is his specific contribution to this stuff? And I just think right now we're seeing a mismatch where Jim Montgomery has taken advantage of what the Jets aren't doing and adjusting to, and it is paying dividends. The Blues, I think, have some legitimate depth challenges, and their blue line, it's not the fleetest of foot. It has been much better in this series with the Jets kind of giving them a lot of runway to work with. But Winnipeg is going to have to make its own adjustments and start pressuring the way that it knows it can. I know that this team doesn't have a ton of finishing talent right now, and there are some really big roster gaps without Velarde and Ehlers both. But at some point, if you really believe that this team is a cup contender, and if this team really is as good as it was in the regular season, they're going to have to show up and start making some of the same plays that they were able to do just a few weeks ago. Now, again, I think that would be overlooking, just how good I think Blues strategy has been. But Winnipeg also showed that throughout the series, they have had games where they've controlled several periods against St. Louis. And, obviously the fast starts have not exactly been a thing for Winnipeg, but you look at the second halves of games in the first two, and especially more so the third period, where, in a couple of those games, the Blues really didn't get any sort of offense going. That's the sort of suffocating defense you want the Jets to play. Even in game 3, which at this point, it might have been score effects and St. Louis not really needing to put pressure on Winnipeg. But, the Blues, I think, got in game 3, maybe 2 shots on goal or something in the second period. Whatever it was very low. And it sort of echoed what we'd seen with previous periods where Winnipeg clogged up the neutral zone, took away time and space, and didn't let St. Louis in. That obviously didn't hold more towards the third period, but the point remains, right? The Jets have had periods where they can show and flex their 5v5 game, but so far it's been not that apparent. And so, as frustrating as I think Hellebuyck's performance has been, and he's really not been good, I also just don't know how you're supposed to get him to make the extra save. I don't know how you cross that bridge until the Jets stop screening him. If they finally make those adjustments and he's still struggling, okay, then you've got a bigger problem. But I feel like right now it's just a mismatch in the tactical approach, the Jets lineup, and what the Blues have tried to do to get him uncomfortable. So work on that. I think things will start to equalize if the Jets can kind of get out of some of these bad habits. And really, Winnipeg just needs to be more disciplined. Don't get caught chasing the play like you have the last several games. You need to focus. You need to lock in. I know that this team can because they have shown it to us many times throughout the season. With all of that said, there are a couple of key lineup changes that we have to see. It's not really an option now. The Jets are going to have to do something. If they drop this game 5, it is basically like 5 alarms on fire, absolute disaster, likely getting out in the first round, which for the Jets would be probably a thermonuclear kind of level of bad. You can't go out like this. The Blues, they're a great team, and I think they've shown it, but if you get ousted in the first round, for Winnipeg specifically, the future picture is not great. So this series has to be a Jets win if Winnipeg wants to avoid a really grim fate going forward. But we'll chat about some swaps and lineup decisions that I think could really help the Jets out against what has frankly been a very pesky, very frustrating team. But before we dive into all of that, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. FanDuel makes betting super easy, whether it's picking your favorite team or diving into player props. You can bet on everything from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props, and this also applies for hockey. So say you're watching the Jets and you want to predict how many Hellebuyck saves you're finally going to get. This is a great way to do it. Perhaps you've taken the under recently. I would personally say, I think Game 5 is going to be a better performance from him. So I would say maybe over 20. I think that wouldn't be completely unfair. But then again, how the Jets have been, maybe you feel a little less confident than I do. But no matter what, once the game is underway, you can even combine live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out and head to FanDuel.com right now to claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just wrapping up with some thoughts on ahead of Game 5's perhaps lineup changes, perhaps proposed practice stuff. Obviously this is a day before, so the optional skates and sort of the practice skates will be underway, after this episode goes live. So we'll see what the line rushes look like then. But from what I know of Arniel and what we've seen of him, he's got a couple of habits. And I think some of those habits sometimes, for me, run counter to what this team does really well. Let's start with a couple of forward changes, right? I think if you're looking at, the second line, right? The second line with Perfetti, Nemesnikov, and Niederreiter has really not been going all that well. They individually have had a couple of moments where maybe Perfetti has made a good play. But, honestly, Perfetti's point in one of these recent games was actually when he was with Scheifele and Connor. So wasn't really on that second line. He's still doing the grindy forechecking work and stuff, but that trio just hasn't really been able to do much of anything. The Lowry line has also kind of been invisible, right? They just really haven't had a lot of impact. And I think Barron looked pretty solid in Game 4. Lowry didn't. Appleton was there and had a moment, but by and large, this middle six has really not been able to pick up any of the slack. And you need tertiary scoring. The top line has been good through the first couple of games. Then Game 3, they had some real issues. Game 4, they had a good first period. And then, after that was kind of a disaster. Somebody's going to have to help pick up the slack, right? If no one can, then this is what you're going to be left with, which is an early out in the first round. So with Velarde coming back, I don't think that he should go back on the first line. CSI will have its issues, absolutely, zero question. I won't dispute that. But I think it looks a lot less bad if you have other lines that can roll after that and help soften up the opposition, right? The CSI line has basically been asked to try and win everything, and it's not working. They're getting matched up against the Thomas line. They have not really won those battles recently. The Lowry line hasn't been able to be used against that trio. Partly from last change and partly because I think Arniel just hasn't really been going for that specific matchup as much. But I think looking at how the Jets should focus for Game 5, For one thing, you need to put Barron back under center. I think that that's really where his best spot is, and I just think you get more out of him. And this is not going to be popular, but look, looking at your center depth, I think if you have the arrangement of Scheifele, Lowry, Barron, and Nemesnikov, that's a lot more workable. I know the Jets won't do this, but like what sort of blows my mind is this is actually not that dissimilar from what the Jets did last year under Bones. The names are obviously different, and I think a couple of guys have been bumped up a little further than they usually would. But like last year, Nemesnikov was being used as a fourth line center. Why the Jets have now figured that he can be a 2C permanently, I don't know. It's not really working. Offensively, he's got like 1 goal in 30 plus games. That's just not good enough. You need more out of that center position. And Lowry obviously doesn't have like the world's best hands. He's got some challenges to his game that I think are going to be, maybe a little frustrating, but he's such a bulldozer and he'll drive so much towards the net that if you give him offensive talent to work with, I think the guys around him are going to be able to take advantage of what he does, especially crashing the crease. So maybe you try him with, Perfetti or something. Maybe you try him with like Velarde. I would love to see Lowry with Velarde. Gabe obviously has, not exactly the highest top end speed, but I think if he doesn't have to be the one to try and create space individually, if it's Lowry and maybe Niederreiter, maybe that trio could be really effective. Appleton has not really been able to get going, so I think this is a way to try and add more punch to your middle six. The third line, if you tried Niederreiter, not Niederreiter, Barron, Perfetti, and maybe, Tanev, he's been okay. I'd like to see Gustafsson and Perfetti play together again. It's not going to happen, but those guys had a lot of natural chemistry with the Moose. I don't know why the Jets really haven't given that one another look. Gus, for some reason, just doesn't really seem to be that favored in this lineup, and he'll probably get benched in the upcoming game, so I'm not even going to really worry about him too much. But I feel like Gus is a really interesting player. He actually has scored this series, and I just think that he's actually underutilized in some ways. So maybe you try to reunite some of your really good skill pairings that you've had at other levels. Other teams do try this, and usually it has some pretty decent results. I'm kind of surprised that Winnipeg hasn't. As far as the fourth line is concerned, I don't really care. I would just make sure that you have Nemesnikov, Appleton, and somebody else there, probably Tanev. Tanev has been fun, but he doesn't really bring a lot of offense, and I think that's been pretty clear. So maybe you can do that and get him going. I don't know. In terms of other changes, though, I just think the Jets, they are in a bit of a tough spot right now, but I think you can win by committee if you try and balance out your offense across your top 9. What I think Arniel's probably going to do is go back to CSV, the well that he feels comfortable with, and I don't know if it's going to work this time. It has worked at other times this season. I just don't know if it's going to be this one. And if that line gets pinned in, it's probably game over. So let's hope that doesn't happen. The other, even more pressing change is your third pairing. Put Colin Miller in. There's really no excuse not to play him. It's indefensible at this point. You can say all you want about the third pairing not playing that much and stuff, but if you can't play that third pairing that much because you don't even trust it, maybe there's a bigger problem. Maybe you should just use one of your top right-handed defenders on the team. It's not like Stanley, Schenn, or Fleury has really done all that well recently. I trust Schenn probably the most out of those three, but he's been bad. So if you use Fleury Miller or Stanley Miller, I would probably be fine with that. Schenn sitting for a game or two, I think would send a message. I think he understands that he's probably really struggled and that he hasn't been up to par. And for Winnipeg, they just need to get more mobile on the back end. Stanley skates all right in transition. Fleury can kind of do it. Miller, I think, will be a more controlling puck carrier than, any of the other three. So try and make something out of this work, right? Don't just look at the size and think that that's going to get you far, because so far it really hasn't. Every time the third pairing goes on the ice, usually it's led to a lot of hem-ins inside the defensive zone. And when your top two pairings are also struggling with that, you would really hope that somebody somewhere is able to make those breakouts a little more cleanly. Morrissey has been awful in the last couple of games. Sandberg has struggled because, he's asked to now try and carry all the stuff, and Pionk is kind of doing whatever Pionk does. So, you need a hero somewhere, but if you don't really give yourself options for mobility and puck carrying on the back end, you're just going to put yourself behind the 8 ball. And I think that's the one thing the Jets really can't afford. Don't make life harder on yourself. Try and find ways to simplify your life. And I think the rest will start to fall into place. I still do believe in this team's ability to win this series. My confidence as to whether they will or not has taken a bit of a hit, but at the end of the day, this team is capable, and they're a President's Trophy team for a reason. So let's just hope that they can get back to good habits and show us some real change. The upcoming practice lines and stuff from Arniel are going to be a big tell as to what he thinks this team's biggest problem is and how they can fix it. So let's hope that he is attentive, that he makes some good changes, and that we finally get back to winning ways. But let me know what you want to see with this Jets team in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Even give me some line combos if you are bored. Not like it'll matter because we know how the Jets will probably do things, but hey, it's always fun to dream. But before we close out, obviously, thanks again for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, check out all the new Locked On NHL Game Night coverage. Every game, every night, until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We will see you back here tomorrow with preview coverage ahead of Game 5. See you then. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets, go.